What is up? Today I'm going to be showing you how to solve your roofing lead quality issue permanently and how you can be closing upwards of 50-60%. If you don't already know who I am, I'm Cole, one of the co-founders of NCT Media. We've basically worked with hundreds of roofers all across the United States by booking thousands of appointments per month, completely done for them. We have a call team, we have media buyers, we make ads, we have a whole creative content team. And yeah, that's basically what we specialize in. So we kind of see the same problems pop up when we run into quality issues, okay? And we have clients, and you can check any of our testimonial pages. We have clients that close at 73%. We've had clients close at 100% in some months. We've had clients close at 90%. We oftentimes get them closing between 40 and 60% just on average, okay? So we kind of have experienced what is going to actually do the trick with your lead quality. Okay, so a lot of people, like I was saying, they think they could just fix their entire lead quality issue by simply adding a confirmation process or having their call team or their sales team have some qualification questions that get added to their sales script, right? And that is not fixing the root of the issue. Now, there's two different areas you could be in. You could be horrible lead quality over here, right? And you could also be mediocre, kind of in the middle. And then everybody wants to be way over here or here, right? Everyone wants to be way over here. So if you're all the way on this end, right, you're zero. You're not going to go 0 to hero from adding a confirmation process and adding a confirmation process and qualification questions, like I was saying, right? Because what's going to happen is these are your leads, right? So you have your leads here. Oops. You have your leads here. And then you add these processes, right? Which is you have these processes that you're adding. And what that's going to do if these leads suck is they're all just going to pour out of this. And you're never going to get anybody down to here, which is what you ultimately want, the sale. Right? So if the leads suck, they're just going to get filtered out of this funnel, like I'm drawing so beautifully. Okay. So that's not going to take you from 0 to hero. Now, if your leads are good, right? If you have good leads, then what this is going to do is it's just going to filter out some of them, right? Which is good. You're saving time on your sales team's calendar. You're saving your time. You're saving everybody's time. You're not going to have as many reps because you're not wasting time on the calendar, right? So that's going to be very helpful and very beneficial, right? But if all of your leads or majority of your leads, like we're talking like 50% plus, are bad, this is not going to help. This is going to probably do more harm than it does good in a lot of cases, because a lot of times you have those leads that are kind of toss-ups where they could be qualified, maybe they're not. They're kind of in a gray area where it would be better to just give your sales guys those leads so they could try to work it into a sale, right? Rather than just completely emptying their calendar and giving them nothing to do. Okay, so honestly, these processes that you would think of adding, which we'll get into, it's not going to be beneficial unless you have solid lead quality to begin with. Okay, so these processes, they will not bring you from 0 to hero. They will help, but they're not going to take you from 0 to hero, like I've been saying. Okay, so we're going to go into exactly what does, right? So when you generate a lead, right, whether you're buying it from somebody or you're running your own ads, which running your own ads, you have a lot more control over this, but you can't change the lead, right? If the lead comes in and they're financially unqualified and their credit score is horrible, you're not going to just magically make their credit score 650 or magically make them have $30,000 that they could just throw into a new roof, right? That is just not going to happen. Okay, so what do you have to do? You have to generate leads that do, right? So you have to go completely to the origin, right? So we have the ad, the lead or the funnel, and then the appointment. And a lot of people, they're trying to fix this right here, between this little process right here. They're trying to fix that. That's not smart, right? Because this is the origin. This is the root, right? This is the root of your tree. Okay, it's the origin of everything, right? Is your ad. Okay, and a lot of people they're trying to go over here, which the further away you get from the origin, the less likely it's going to be to actually fix that issue. Okay, so yes, fixing that is beneficial. Fixing your funnel is beneficial. Fixing, the things between this is beneficial. Right? So that's going to be helpful, but the most helpful thing is going to be fixing the root of the issue. That's your biggest lever here. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're also going to go into the other parts of the process as well. But fixing the root of the issue is incredibly important here. Okay? Okay, so let's talk about how we could actually fix the root of all your issues. Okay? So you might think, like, how could I control in an ad if the lead quality is going to be good? How could I control that, right? Because you're not filtering anybody out necessarily like you would in a funnel. You're not filtering them out in your call scripts, but you can filter them out in other ways, okay? And this is the most important ways, right? Because the way Facebook works is Facebook, it's not like it was in 2015 where you could upload a list or you could type in some sort of interest targeting and that's going to do fix all your problems. Facebook is heavily integrated with AI. And what this AI does is it reads your ad and based off your ad and what your ad says, what your ad looks like, it's going to deliver it to people that are likely to react to that ad, right? So for example, if you're saying something in your ad like there's a government program that is going to get you a roof and you're talking in your ad about somebody not being able to afford a roof, all this stuff, right? What does that tell Facebook? That tells Facebook that you are going to pretty much get people a new roof for close to nothing, right? It's going to be a very easy, costless program that is going to get them a roof, right? And you as a roofing company, can you fulfill on that promise? No. Most likely you can. Okay? Same thing as saying no upfront costs. Get a roof for no upfront costs. Can you fulfill on that promise? Probably not, right? And if you can, right, if you have some sort of financing options that are very flexible, then you're still messaging towards broker homeowners, right? So you need to make sure they have a good credit score. So there's ways to do this, right? But the biggest thing here is your offer being in full, complete, and utter alignment with what you sell. Okay? Because if it's not, then simply put, you're going to attract people that you can't sell to, right? So if you're advertising an offer that you don't actually sell, then they're not going to convert on the offer that you sell, okay? They would be good to convert on the offer you're advertising for, but not on the offer you sell. Now, a lot of people, they don't recognize this because it is very difficult to advertise the offer that you sell, usually, right? Because why? A lot of other people sell that same offer, okay? So it doesn't seem interesting, it doesn't seem enticing, it doesn't seem exciting, okay? It seems very boring, basic, etc., and it's hard to get leads when you're just advertising what everyone else sells. So I'm not going to get into it too much on how you make your offer sound good and how you make it interesting, but we do it. A lot of other people do it. You need to learn how to make your offer sound interesting. We have clients that close at like 70% or 50% on the first appointment. So they show up to the appointment and it's a one appointment close at 50% because they have a very interesting offer. Okay. And there's a lot of things that you could do in roofing, okay, to make your offer interesting, right? But this is the issue. A lot of people, they will go so far away from their offer and they will go over here, right? And they're over here selling some other offer that is almost unrecognizable from their actual offer, which is going to make it equally as hard to sell because it's far away from what you sell, right? So the further you get from your offer, the harder it is to sell, is essentially what I'm saying here. So your offer is one of the key things in your ad, right? Because it's ultimately the reason why people click on your actual ad. Okay. So if they click on your ad expecting something that you don't sell, they're going to be unqualified. They're not going to be an easy sell for your offer. Okay. So my whole point here is you need to be in complete congruence with your offer. That is the most important thing because that's why these people click, okay, is because of what you offer, okay? And if you can't offer what you're advertising that you offer, you're not going to make sales, okay? Simply put, you're going to get bad leads. So that's the first thing I would look into fixing. That's going to be your biggest thing because again, that's why people click on your ad, okay? Then additionally, this next thing is going to be called messaging. I don't know if you've heard of messaging, but messaging is incredibly important. Okay, what is messaging? So your messaging is essentially just what you're saying in your ad, right? So what's the overall message of your ad? Who in your ad are you messaging to? Very important, right? So example, this is not going to be related to your offer, but if in my hook I say, and I'm going to use an example of what we've done in the past to see unqualified results. So if we say something like, my mom's roof was leaking and she didn't have any money to fix it, right? So who am I targeting? You're targeting people with a roof that's leaking. That's great. You could help those people. But people that don't have any money to fix it, can you help those people? More than likely not, right? So that's an example of messaging that isn't going to target my ideal client demographic. Now, an important thing to understand here is there's a gray area. So I just gave you an example of a clearly bad messaging, right? But then you have this gray area. So I'm just going to call it gray message, right? You have this gray area, okay? And then we'll put down here where it's good M. I'm not even going to, just good M, right? So this gray area, the issue with the gray area is it appeals both to the bad and the good client demographic. Okay, so an example of this, for example, would be something, and it's not necessarily always bad. Again, it depends on your offer, but this is an example. This is an example to kind of the majority here. Okay, so let's say you say something like, "I've gotten quotes from all these roofing contractors, and all of them are too expensive." They weren't a good enough deal, whatever, right? What are you saying there? Yes, that's appealing to people that do have the money because obviously they're going to want to pay less. It's less extreme as saying like, I don't have any money to fix it, but it's also saying that every other roofing competitor, their price that's in your market, their price is too expensive, while yours is going to be this magical cheap price. No, more than likely not, right? So the thing there is it's going to target good people, but also bad people. You're kind of in this middle ground here. And this is where it kind of gets difficult because when you could go overboard with the good messaging and now you're just not going to get leads, right? You're like saying in your hook, you're going to get a new roof for 30 grand, right? Like just super upfront, you know, super like good messaging in terms of you're going to target the right people, but you're not going to get anybody to click on that, right? So it's difficult, and this is where advertising gets hard, is when you're in this middle ground where you need to attract a lot of people and you need to get people to actually be enticed by your offer and click on your ad, but you also don't want to target people that you can't sell to, people that are financially less qualified, right? So this is where it kind of gets difficult. And I'm not going to go over how to make your offer interesting and how to attract that. We've gone over that in previous videos. It is not the most, difficult thing on the planet, but it is where advertising gets a little bit difficult is when you're trying to not message to these broker homeowners, but you're trying to hit that right audience while also enticing them. Okay. So that's where it kind of gets difficult, but you also don't really want to have this gray area messaging, right? Where you're speaking to bad people and you're speaking to good people. Okay, good in terms of like their quality, I'm not talking morality here. Okay, I'm not saying because they're broke they're bad people. That's not what I'm saying. All right, but let's Okay, so let me kind of show you what good messaging looks like. Good messaging, good M, is going to speak to ICP, so your ideal client profile, right? But it's also going to make it clear it's not for, I'm going to say NICP, right? So non-ideal client profile. I just made that up, but it sounds cool. Okay, so you need to do both these things, right? Because when you're in the gray area, you speak to your ICP, but you also speak to that NICP, right? But good messaging speaks to your ICP, but it makes it clear that it's not for your NICP, right? So if I'm the NICP watching and I'm seeing the hook in the ad, it becomes very clear that this is not for me. That's essentially what I mean, right? It's not this gray area where it targets both. And then the ICP, obviously watching the ad, they're like, okay, this is for me. Okay, this is something I'm interested in, right? So an example in the ad itself would be making it very clear that this is going to cost a good bit of money, right? So saying something along those lines in the ad, like, you know, I've been getting quotes from contractors, 25 grand, 30 grand, but this local roofing company saves homeowners a couple $1,000s, right? Something like that, right? Which is good because like I'm going to get a good deal, right? I'm going to save money in comparison to my competitors, but I'm still going to be paying 20 grand or 19 grand or 18 grand or whatever, right? So that is going to kick out those bad people, right? Because they don't have that money and they can't work with you, right? But it's also very clearly targeting and enticing that better and that ideal client profile, right? So that is an example of what good messaging is, right? So if you implement these things with your offer and with your messaging, you're going to fix your lead quality pretty much, right? So another thing that you want to implement here is your funnel, right? So funnel, this is very simple. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but you want to have a funnel survey that aligns with your ad, right? So it asks questions and then it disqualifies them based on, credit score. It could be, or it could be, insurance. If you do that, it could be their home type, all these different things, right? Because number one, you can't really do all the messaging that you need in your ad. Like if you own your home and you have a single family and you have X insurance, you don't want to put that in your ad, right? That's kind of what you want to put in your funnel survey. Okay, so you want to qualify here. And the reason this is important is because this is kind of the second thing that is going to feed Facebook information, right? Because if they're delivering your ad to a bunch of unqualified people and they click on your survey and they don't get through your survey, which means they don't become a lead, then that's going to tell Facebook we need to show that ad to other people. So your survey being in alignment with your ad, I'll just say like equals, right? If you have this in alignment, now that is the ultimate formula for delivering your ad to your ICP and then essentially getting, quality leads, right? Depending on your situation here, this first whole thing with your ad, like I was saying, let's go back up. Like I was saying, the root of the issue. This could bring you literally from zero to hero, or it could bring you from zero to maybe that like mediocre point I was talking about, right? So these next things, I'm going to go over it a little quicker because it's super simple. And a lot of you probably already are aware of this. We also have other videos talking about this. But this could bring you from that. If the ad stuff that I just talked about bring you to the middle point, maybe you're getting like 60, 70% show rates. You're getting some good close rates going. This next part will bring it up by a decent percent. This could bring you from good to great, okay, essentially. And we've implemented this for our clients and for ourselves, and this is something that's brought us from good to great, okay? So fixing the ad, that will bring you to good. But if you want to go to great, you need this next stuff, okay? And that is every lead comes in that even books an appointment. They have questions. They have objections. So that's what we call objections and FAQs, right? And what does this FAQs and objections do? If you let these linger, even before the appointment, if you let these things linger, That's going to build uncertainty, and that's going to start to build disinterest, and that might also, make them look somewhere else, right? So these questions, right, they are going to build uncertainty and disinterest, right, over time. If I have a question about something and that question is not getting answered, I'm either going to look for the answers to that question myself, somewhere else, or I'm just going to, over time, just get less interested, right? They still have this problem of needing a roof, but they might have questions about your company. They might have questions about what you offer, about your materials, about all these different things, right? And these questions over time is going to make me uncertain about you and disinterested about you. This is why it's super important to be quick. When the lead comes in, call them instantly, book them as soon as possible, so you don't let that disinterest build. You don't let any of that build, right? And this all comes down to clarity, okay? So this all essentially is solved with creating clarity, okay? So you want to make it very clear about you, your company, what you offer, etc., to these people from the jump, okay? And this is the biggest thing. This is literally the biggest thing in your pre-call stuff. A confirmation process is not going to do as good as this is going to do, okay? But it will help. So what you want to do to create this clarity, which clarity is going to equal good show rate, so it's going to create really good close rate and show rate, this clarity, right? And you build this clarity by, crazy concept, but answering questions, right? So FAQs and objections, those are all comes down to pretty much just questions, right? So answering these questions is going to create clarity. So answering questions equals clarity. Now you may ask, how do I do this, right? How do I do this? Okay, so there's a couple ways that we do this. Okay, number one, videos. So what we're going to do is when the lead comes in, we book the lead or the lead books itself online. We send them a thank you page, right? Which is going to be like, your appointment's confirmed, blah, blah, blah. Do these few things before the appointment. And that's going to have a video on it or multiple videos on it that are answering these frequently asked questions and objections, right? So what does this do? If they watch those videos and they consume that content, then before the appointment, they aren't going to have those questions, right? Which is going to create more trust with your company, going to create more certainty, and it's just going to make them more interested overall, right? Which is ultimately what we want. And it's going to make the close easier. They're more likely to show. They're not going to look for those answers to those questions somewhere else, because that's the last thing you want, right? If you let these people look somewhere else, they might find an answer that isn't, the answer that you would want them to find, right? Maybe they find the single bad review that you have, and it just builds all this disinterest. And that's something that you want to address, right? So you want to be like, we have this bad review. This is actually what happened, blah, 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 blah. And they're actually going to be very trustworthy of you. It's like, we have 90 reviews. 85 of them are great. We have 3 mediocre ones, and we have 2 really bad ones. Okay, so let me address those 2 really bad ones and talk to you about what happened. Because people don't want to know just how good things are going to go. They also want to know how bad things can go. Okay, and if they find out and you explain to them it is very improbable for things to go bad, then they're going to have a lot of trust in you and your business. Okay, so videos on the thank you page addressing these things, building trust with your company. Not everybody's going to watch these videos, right? So secondly, you want to hit them with pre-call emails. Okay, so hit them with a couple emails a day addressing these questions and objections. I promise you, if 1 in 10 people complain, those people are not going to move forward anyways. You don't even want to work with them. Okay, so don't worry about sending too many emails. And then the last thing here is, if you have a confirmation process or when you book them on the phone, you want to answer those on the phone. Okay, so those are the biggest things that I would do here. Okay, and this exactly, being aware of these objections and these questions that pop up frequently about your business, your offer, etc., being able to answer those before the appointment is going to do huge, 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 huge things for your sales process, okay? But, like I said, if the lead's bad, these things aren't going to do anything, because if it's not qualified, it's not qualified. If it's not your ideal client profile, nothing's going to change about that, right? This will just make your ideal client profile more interested, making their intent higher and their quality and their interest higher, right? So that's going to help your close rates and show rates, which will bring you from good to great, like I said. Okay, so if you implement all these things, and so if you implement all these things, you are very likely to have an incredible show rate and close rate and just overall great quality. Okay. Now, if this all is kind of a lot and you want somebody to do it all for you, you could click the top link in the description, book a call. You'll talk to somebody on my team, and we'll see if we're a good fit to work together. We will be completely honest if your situation, market, your team, your business's setup is likely to work or likely not to work. We don't like just taking money from anybody because we don't want to waste your time and money and our time and money. Okay, so click that top link if you're interested in that. If not, and you're somebody that likes to do everything themselves, I completely understand. I'm similar in that way. Check out some other videos on our channel, subscribe, and stay tuned for future videos because we talk about countless different topics that are going to improve your roofing sales. That's it. Peace out. Have a good one.